Ever feel like you're caught in a whirlwind, you know, just reacting to everything life throws at you?
Oh, yeah.
Today we're diving into this ancient text, and it offers a different perspective. It's kind of a roadmap to understanding, who we are and how to navigate this crazy thing we call life.
I like that.
We're tackling chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
It's often called Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness.
It's like stepping onto a battlefield. But the clash isn't just between armies,
Okay,
but between these forces within us.
I like that.
Yeah.
And to be specific, we're using the 1972 edition of the Bhagavad Gita as it is,
Yes.
translated and commented on by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Prabhupada's work has been so instrumental in bringing these ancient teachings to a wider audience.
Yeah.
His commentary adds layers of depth that help us unpack the complexities.
Before we jump into chapter 13, let's quickly recap where we are in the story.
Yeah?
For anyone just joining us.
Yeah.
We've met Arjuna, a warrior facing a moral dilemma, fighting a battle against his own family.
It's his own family.
And we have Krishna, his charioteer,
Right.
who has revealed himself to be a divine being.
Exactly. And Arjuna's understandably struggling with his duty as a warrior
Yeah,
versus his personal attachments.
right.
It's a conflict we all face in different ways.
Yeah.
The pull between what we feel we should do and what our heart wants.
Okay, so chapter 13 comes at this crucial point. What's the big reveal?
Well,
What is Krishna trying to illuminate for Arjuna and for us?
this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Chapter 13 dives into the nature of reality itself. It distinguishes between the individual soul,
Good.
called jiva in Sanskrit,
Right.
and the supreme soul is vara, which is another name for God.
Hold on, can we pause there for a second?
Sure.
I remember when I first encountered these terms,
Yeah.
they were a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with Sanskrit,
Right.
how would you explain Jiva and Isvar?
It's like imagining a single wave in the vastness of the ocean.
Okay.
The wave is the jiva individual, unique,
Right.
but ultimately part of something much bigger.
Okay.
The ocean is Isvara, the source from which all waves arise and eventually return.
Okay, that image helps.
Yeah.
So chapter 13 is exploring this connection between the individual and the divine,
Right.
but also their distinct nature.
Exactly.
But how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah.
How do we as individual souls even begin to understand this vast universal consciousness?
That's where the concept of the three gunas comes in.
The gunas.
Yeah.
Those were a big part of our previous deep dives into the Gita.
Right.
It's like the cosmic software that influences everything, right?
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Chapter 13 takes this concept further and breaks down how these gunas,
Look.
goodness, passion, and ignorance, color our perceptions,
Right.
shape our desires,
Yeah.
and even influence our actions.
I'm already seeing how this connects back to Arjuna's dilemma.
Yeah.
If our actions are swayed by these gunas,
Right.
how can we be held responsible for the choices we make? Does that mean we don't have free will?
Now that's a question for the ages.
Right.
Chapter 13 doesn't necessarily provide a definitive answer,
Okay.
but it does offer clues.
Okay.
Remember, Krishna describes the soul as being atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. He's actually quoting from the Mundaka Upanishad here.
Wait, so he's pulling in wisdom from another ancient text.
He is.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that quote?
It suggests that beneath the turbulence of our thoughts and emotions, there's a pure, unchanging self that's connected to the divine. This inner self is capable of perceiving the truth, seeing beyond the illusions created by the gunas.
So it's like saying that while our actions might be influenced by these external forces,
Yes.
our true nature is pure and connected to something bigger.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's where the idea of self-realization comes in.
Right. It's about recognizing that deeper self,
Right.
that spark of consciousness within us,
Right.
and its connection to the Supreme Soul.
But if we're constantly bombarded by these gunas,
Yeah.
the anxieties of work,
Right.
the distractions of social media, the temptations of everything,
Yeah.
how do we even begin to access that deeper self?
That's the journey chapter 13 lays out for us. And that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
This is already making me rethink my whole approach to life.
It is a very powerful chapter.
Can't wait to unpack it further when we come back.
Yeah.
Welcome back. I'm still reeling from that image of the jiva as a wave and Isvara as the ocean.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful way to think about our connection to the divine.
It really captures the essence of chapter 13.
Mhm.
And remember, we left off talking about how the three gunas, goodness, passion, and ignorance, can cloud our perception and influence our actions.
Right. It's like they're constantly pulling us in different directions.
Yeah.
So how do we break free from that tug of war? Right.
And start to experience that deeper self, that connection to Isvara.
Chapter 13 offers several paths, and what's fascinating is that it acknowledges that there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Okay.
It highlights the paths of knowledge meditation and selfless action, all leading towards self-realization.
So it's less about finding the right path and more about choosing a path that resonates with who we are.
Exactly. It's about using the tools and practices that resonate most deeply with us to purify our consciousness and gain a clearer understanding of our true nature.
Okay, I can get behind that. But it still sounds pretty abstract.
Sure.
Can we break down each path a little further?
Yeah.
What does it actually look like to walk the path of knowledge, for example?
Think of it as a deep dive into understanding the nature of reality of the self and the divine.
Okay.
It involves studying scriptures, engaging in philosophical discussions, and reflecting on the deeper meaning of life.
So it's about using our intellect to cut through the illusions created by the gunas.
Precisely. And the path of meditation focuses on stilling the mind, training our attention, and quieting the constant chatter of our thoughts.
I can see how that would be helpful in a world full of distractions.
Yeah.
But what about selfless action?
Right.
How does that lead to self-realization?
This path emphasizes acting without attachment to the outcome, doing what's right simply because it's right, and offering our actions as a form of service to the divine.
It's interesting how these paths, though seemingly different, all seem to point towards the same goal: understanding our true nature and our connection to something bigger.
Exactly. And the beauty of chapter 13 is that it encourages us to explore these paths,
Yeah.
to experiment and find what works best for us.
Okay, but let's be honest, applying these principles in our everyday lives can feel like a whole other challenge. We're bombarded with information, deadlines, and temptations. How do we integrate these ancient teachings into our modern, hectic world?
That's where the rubber meets the road, right? And chapter 13 offers some surprisingly practical advice. Remember how it compares controlling the mind to capturing the wind?
Oh yeah, that image always stuck with me. It feels so relatable, especially in our age of constant distractions.
The chapter stresses the importance of cultivating self-control, of becoming aware of the gunas, influencing our thoughts and actions, and choosing to align ourselves with goodness.
So it's about making conscious choices, even in small everyday moments.
Exactly. It's about becoming mindful of what we eat, how we work, how we interact with others, and even how we spend our free time. Are we feeding our passions or nurturing our inner peace?
I'm starting to see how this is less about grand gestures and more about a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
A conscious effort to live in alignment with our deeper self.
It's about recognizing that every choice, every action is an opportunity to move closer to or further from self-realization.
Okay, this is all making a lot of sense. But I have to ask, if we fail to achieve self-realization in this lifetime, what happens?
Okay.
Does all our effort just disappear?
That's a question that chapter 13 addresses directly, and it offers a perspective that I find both challenging and comforting. It talks about the cycle of birth and death, suggesting that those who haven't achieved liberation will be reborn.
It's like we're on a continuous journey of evolution.
Right.
And the progress we make in one lifetime carries over to the next.
That's the idea. And it's incredibly encouraging because it means that our efforts are never wasted. Every step we take towards self-awareness, every act of kindness, every moment of clarity is a seed planted for future growth.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it. It takes the pressure off needing to achieve some perfect state of enlightenment and reframes it as an ongoing process of learning and evolving.
Exactly, and that's what's so liberating about chapter 13.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we're not alone on this journey, that we have the wisdom of the ages to guide us, and that even small, consistent efforts can have a profound impact.
This is so much more than just an intellectual exercise. It's a practical guide to living a more meaningful and fulfilling life. I'm eager to hear what else chapter 13 has in store for us.
Yeah.
Shall we continue our deep dive?
Absolutely. Let's explore some of the specific verses and see how their teachings can be applied to our lives today.
Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, as we've been exploring chapter 13, I've been thinking about how different this approach to self-discovery is. Compared to what we often see in modern self-help culture,
Yeah.
It's less about achieving some external goal and more about cultivating inner awareness.
It's a profound shift in perspective. Chapter 13 encourages us to look inward to understand the forces at play within ourselves, rather than focusing solely on manipulating the external world.
And that inward journey seems to be at the heart of what the Gita calls self-realization.
Right.
But what does that actually mean? Is it some kind of ultimate state of bliss
Right.
where we're free from all problems?
It's not about escaping the challenges of life, but rather about facing them with clarity and equanimity. Self-realization, as described in Chapter 13, is about recognizing our true nature, that spark of consciousness, the jiva that's connected to the divine, to Isvara.
Okay, so it's not about becoming some superhuman version of ourselves,
Yeah.
but rather about understanding who we truly are at our core.
Exactly. And recognizing that our true self is not bound by the limitations of the material world,
Okay.
by the gunas that can cloud our perception and influence our actions.
That reminds me of something we touched on earlier, the idea that those who haven't achieved self-realization will be reborn.
Right.
Is Chapter 13 suggesting that this cycle of birth and death is somehow a bad thing?
It's not necessarily portrayed as good or bad, but rather as a natural consequence of our actions and attachments. The cycle continues until we've learned the lessons we need to learn and purified our consciousness to the point where we're no longer bound by those limitations.
So each lifetime is an opportunity for growth, for moving closer to self-realization.
Precisely. And the actions we take, the choices we make, are shaping not only this life, but also future lifetimes.
That's a pretty powerful concept. It makes me think about how every moment, every decision carries more weight than we realize, but it also feels a bit daunting. What if we make mistakes? What if we mess things up?
Chapter 13 offers reassurance on that front, too. It emphasizes the importance of intention and effort. Remember, it's about the journey, not the destination.
So it's not about being perfect, but about striving to make choices that are aligned with our true nature, with goodness, with our connection to the divine.
Exactly. And even when we stumble, even when we fall back into old patterns, the key is to learn from those experiences and keep moving forward.
It's like we're constantly refining our understanding, peeling back the layers of illusion to reveal our true self.
It's a beautiful way to describe it, and Chapter 13 encourages us to approach this journey with curiosity, with courage, and with an open heart.
You know, one of the things that struck me most about this chapter is its emphasis on taking responsibility for our own spiritual growth.
Right.
It's not about waiting for some external force to save us, but about actively engaging in the process of self-discovery.
That's one of the key takeaways for me as well. Chapter 13 is a call to action. It's an invitation to become active participants in our own evolution, to utilize the tools of knowledge, meditation, and selfless action to purify our consciousness and move closer to self-realization.
It's inspiring, but also a bit challenging.
It is.
It's like we're being asked to step up and become the heroes of our own spiritual journeys.
And we have the resources to do it. Chapter 13 reminds us that we're not alone.
Right.
We have the wisdom of the Gita, the guidance of spiritual teachers, and the support of a community of seekers to help us along the way.
This has been an incredible deep dive into Chapter 13. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, but it's definitely given me a lot to think about and apply to my own life. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
If you're feeling inspired by what we've explored today, I encourage you to pick up a copy of the Bhagavad Gita and dive into Chapter 13 for yourself. Let these ancient teachings speak to your heart and guide you on your own unique journey of self-discovery. And don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations of fascinating topics. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new subject. Until then, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep exploring the vastness within.